My name's Jarrett Sullivan, and welcome to Downton Revisited. So have a cup of tea, sit down on that couch, and let's watch Season 1, Episode 2. Alright, for Episode 2, the classic credits are back. We have the opening credits, the ones before every episode, besides a couple of the Christmas specials. These are just fantastic. It's epic, it's sweeping, and it shows the main character of the show, Downton Abbey herself. Though I have to smirk a little bit because of how Simon Pegg referred to it as Dog Butt Abbey due to that first shot. Since it's still early on with this second episode, the show is still courting us. The plots aren't getting too dramatic, it's not getting too dark or deep, because the show still wants us to watch it. The episode starts with Matthew and Mrs. Crawley arriving at Crawley House. How strange must it be to come to a place that has a house named after you that isn't even the mansion? We can really get to know Matthew now. Matthew is the audience vehicle character. He's the person that's most like us in our modern sensibilities. He's a lawyer, and he lives simply, though he does remark,
"We've always managed perfectly well with a cook and a maid."
But he's now been uprooted and put into this world so we can see the aristocratic life and the life at Downton through Matthew's eyes and really feel it as we would. Of course, Matthew reacts to inheriting an estate with being kind of grumpy and not being happy about it and not wanting it to be changed. I think I would react a little bit differently. Mr. Jarrett Sullivan, yep, Yes. Yeah! But that's just me. That might just be my American sensibilities, I don't know. So the plot continues, we get to really focus on Matthew, and he puts his foot in his mouth in front of Mary over and over again, and of course she doesn't take any crap from anybody, and she isn't afraid to make people feel bad about themselves, so they have some back and forth that's really fun, and you can see as the audience the relationship being like, oh, they're gonna get together, but when? So a historical reference for the period, the Dowager Countess references Mr. Lloyd George and his policies. It's the future Prime Minister, David Lloyd George. At the moment, he is the Chancellor of the Exchequer, which is kind of like the Secretary of the Treasury, sort of. It's a little different over there, especially in this time period, but controls some monetary policy, and he is responsible for setting up the current welfare state of England. A lot of changes coming. He is one of the guys responsible for it, and the aristocracy is not going to be very happy with him. And it's one of those little winks and nods to the period. At this dinner, we come to the Dowager Countess Quote of the Week. Quote of the Week. Quote of the Week.
Don't worry. There are plenty of hours in the day. And of course I'll have the weekend.
We'll discuss this later. We mustn't bore the ladies.
What is a weekend?
I love it. She's so amazing. The genius part of that line, though, is how it really shows how of a different world she is. Another really funny thing to me in this episode, William has a tear on his shoulder, and Carson berates him as his state of undress compared to today's so ridiculous, lax, casual way of dressing, especially here in America. It's, you know, t-shirt and jeans, no one will blink twice at you. And now if you dressed up in tweed every day with a tie, someone might look at you like you're the anachronism, you're the funny one, versus then they would be shocked that you'd be in your underwear in such a state of undress. So the big theme of this episode seems to be identity and who they are. O'Brien brings up that Matthew isn't a real aristocrat. Matthew himself says how he doesn't want them to change him. He likes being who he is. Matthew won't let Mosley dress him. Poor Mosley.
I'm just stood there like a chump, watching a man get dressed.
So Matthew, from our understanding modern perspective, he wants to fire Mosley. He doesn't need a valet. He can dress himself. He's used to doing that, just like we are. Why would you need that? Why would you have some man there to help you get dressed? And so he wants to fire him. And Lord Grantham has the opposite perspective.
We all have different parts to play, Matthew. And we must all be allowed to play them.
So it kind of shows that other perspective on the aristocracy, where Matthew doesn't like to have all this. It is Mosley's livelihood. It's how he makes his living, and without that job he would have to be doing some very difficult labor, and being a house servant is very upscale for people who work. They are given respect because they work in the big house. So this is an important thing, and Lord Grantham allow people to play their parts is part of this identity theme of this episode. And it's also shows Lord Grantham in this positive light again, that he understands that it's kind of ridiculous to have someone dress you. But he also knows that he's giving these people jobs and has helped supporting them and has people who depend on him. And that's a good thing. And then we see Mr. Carson stealing food from the kitchens and kind of being shifty, very un-Carson-like. He's terrible at being this way. And then we meet Mr. Grigg. This guy shows up in like an orange and tan suit. It's awesome, with a bowler and an orange bow tie. He looks slick. He looks so good. He was a vaudevillian, and he was partnered with Charlie Carson. We see this identity of Carson, that his shame, and he tenders his resignation, and Lord Grantham was like, don't be so dramatic, and actually I'm kind of impressed. So Carson has had this identity as this proper guy who can call out others on their state of undress, and then he feels that it's just a sham because it's not who he was born to be or who he was early in his life and how he has changed. So it's this sense of identity, and of course we as the audience are very amused by this. This is entertaining. It also makes Carson not so stuffy, or lets us really appreciate how stuffy he is, because it's something he has aspired to be, not just what he was born to be or what he was told to behave as. It's what he has chosen. So we have this identity with Carson. We have this identity with Mosley. We have this identity with the aristocrats, the upstairs people. We also have another big moment from Sybil, why we love Sybil. When Mr. Grigg shows up, Sybil says,
"Then I'll stay with you in case explanations are needed."
Carson is Lord Grantham's employee, and there are certain rules, and the way things are not great, and you can get fired for any reason. And so Sybil's there just to explain things in case someone shows up and she needs to. Sybil realizes her position, which is why we love her. She is more modern than anyone else, and she understands what her power she has and wants to use it for the benefit of others that don't have that power. More plots introduced when Thomas dances with Daisy doing the grizzly bear. It shows that Thomas isn't just heartless, like he's been scheming and conniving up to this point, but this shows he actually is a good person. He's torn and he's in the closet, and this is a time when being gay is illegal, so he can't be who he is, and he can't find love, and I would be kind of mad if that was me too. So we learn that Thomas isn't all bad, that O'Brien is probably the influence that causes him to be as bad as he is, but that he can dance with Daisy. Of course, Daisy has a big crush on him. William is shown to have a crush on Daisy, and these plots are introduced here. But it's also a great character moment to show that it's not just plotting and scheming with Thomas and O'Brien, that Thomas is a more fleshed out character, and we see a hope of a good person in him, that he's not just a villain. And I really like that part of this episode. It's excellent. So identity is like the big push in this episode. I think it's handled really well. We learn the identity of Matthew and where he's coming from and how he has places to go to. We see more of Lord Grantham and how he is the positive side of the aristocracy. And we get to learn more about Mr. Carson in one of his very few plot lines. Yeah, great episode. So click on my T-Mug here to subscribe to the channel. Thanks for watching. We're going to do episode 3 right next, so come on back. Hope you enjoy it.